Hello, Red Wave. Welcome to Where Bulldogs podcast. My name is Caleb. The other host name is Caleb. This is the show where the Calebs talk Fresno State, and joining us is the man that talks Fresno State all the time. He's got all the answers. The one, the only, Jackson Moore. Jackson, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing good. Thank you guys for having me.
Caleb, sorry, I didn't forget about you. Thank you for joining us and doing the show with me. How are you, man?
I'm doing really well. It's another beautiful Monday. Weather's been nice lately. The heat's coming though, but that's good. I mean, that means summer's here. Summer practices. The player run practices are ongoing, and so that's exciting.
Yeah, we're gonna have a packed show for you today. Obviously, we'll probably be able to go all night with Jackson, but we won't do that to you guys. I don't know. Maybe they want us to. Sorry, Jackson. We signed you up for a lot. No, just kidding. Rob's here. He says, let's go, dogs. We are going to be talking about Phil Steele. He released his All Mountain West teams. There's some dogs in the mix. I want to get Jackson's thoughts on that. We have some football commits that are from the Valley. Well, we want to know what's going on, Jackson, so we're going to ask you about that. I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a Bulldog scholarship available. I want to pick your brain on that. And then we'll talk expansion. And I know Jackson has not talked enough about expansion yet, so we just want to make sure we hit on that. So, yeah, Bulldogs Bob is here. It's about time you had Jackson on. Sorry, Jackson, it's been so long. And also, I did have on the docket, if everyone can, we want to pray for Bulldogs Bob. He's having some health issues, so shoot a prayer up for his health. And Bob, we thank you for always joining us on the live streams and giving us a hard time. And you make it a lot easier, by the way. You too, the other Bob, or Rob, as we say, is also here. So, all right, Jackson, let's start this thing off. We're going to start off with the Phil Steele. How always do that? Phil Steele, All Mountain West team. And if you need time to pull it up, because I know I threw this on you at the last second, feel free. But there wasn't a whole lot of first teamers on the Phil Steele team, which I was disappointed in. But is there anything that stood out to you from these, I believe, 4 teams, first, second, third, and fourth teams that he released?
Yeah, I do have it up just because, last year I kind of felt like all right, these guys are first teamers. Maybe here's some seconds and some third and fourth. And, the star power is not as nationally known right now. A lot of credit to Phil Steele because I know he goes in depth with pretty much all the head coaches before he does this kind of stuff. So it's not throwing stuff against the wall here. And this is real research stuff. I do have a hard time with Fresno State just having 2 first teamers. I think as good as the Bulldogs are going to be, they're going to end up with a lot more than that at the end of the season. But I can understand why it would be tough to pick more than a couple of guys. Lavelle Bailey, I think, certainly deserves it. For my money, I like Carlton Johnson and Cam Lockridge as well as any cornerbacks in the country. It would be tough for me to put them both on the first team and piss off 10 other or 11 other fan bases. But there's one's second team, one's fourth team. I think they're both probably undervalued on that list. Then I think everything else is pretty fair. I mean, they've even got Malik Sherrod on there as a fourth teamer, and we haven't seen quite what he can do yet as a starter. So, it's fair. But for a preseason list, I think the end of the season will be a different story.
Yeah, I know. We can't take preseason too seriously, but it's great for the media, as I like to say, because we get to talk about it like this. Caleb, do you have any thoughts? I got some beef, and I know Cam Lockridge has some beef too. If you guys are on Twitter, but Caleb, do you have anything to say about this Phil Steele Mountain West team?
Yeah, I think it's good to see Moshe Vaveo getting some appreciation because he's really the I guess, most experienced guy coming back on this Fresno State offensive line, I would think. And so, he's been a really solid contributor for really his whole time here in the program. So I think it's good that he's getting some appreciation there because I know that, O-line, often overlooked, and maybe those guys aren't always getting appreciated. So I think that was nice to see him be appreciated, because dogs are going to need him, and he's going to be a big part of the O-line this year.
Yeah, I agree. Are there any players that are not on there, Jackson, that you think will be considered all Mountain West by the end of the season?
I was just thinking about that because I feel like the gap between Mose Vavao and Jacob Spomer might not be that large. And for one to be a first teamer and one to not be on the list at all, 4 teams deep, is a little, I think there's a closer gap between those guys. And then the other one, I was just thinking, Devo Bridges, where is he at? He's not on there at all. And I mean, I think this D line is going to be very good for Fresno State. And as good as Johnny Hudson is, Bridges might be that anchor this season. So he's definitely missing from that group. And I think there's quite a few transfers that, again, it's tough for preseason when they haven't played for the Bulldogs before, but probably will end up on a 4-deep all-conference list by the end of the year.
Yeah, definitely, especially on like the wide receiver side. I mean, there's so many question marks there that obviously someone is going to have to step up and be an offensive weapon for this team. So you got to think one of those guys is going to end up on that some sort of list too.
Yeah, I said I that's what I've said the past couple episodes, that's the one thing going for us Fresno State guys, is that we know what we have, but other people haven't seen it yet, either because of injury, transfers, things like that. Bob says Steele didn't disrespect the dogs as badly as Mountain West Wire did. I haven't read that one, but he also thinks Trey Watson, if healthy, should be a first teamer. I agree. And then Robert asks, Jackson, this might be one for you. How does San Jose State have a higher ranked preseason defense than Fresno State? Is that because the guys they put in the draft, guys coming back? What is that all about?
Yeah, that's one of those things you wonder if it's more reputation based than anything else, just because they've gotten really solid at defense the last few years. They've been headlined by some pretty high star power, but the 3 biggest stars on the defense are all gone this year now. I've been out around their spring camp quite a bit, and they've got some guys that can potentially fill some of those holes, but not quite the star power that they had before. When I look at Fresno State and I look at the stars that they do have coming back, the guys we mentioned, especially the cornerbacks, I think they're probably a little better off on defense right now. You don't have to come up with excuses to make San Jose State feel good. They might have the best quarterback in the conference. So, at least going into the preseason, I know Cordero is probably the preseason first team all conference Mountain West quarterback. So they've got some tools, but they have some question marks also.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness, Caleb and I have been talking about it. Our front 7 is unbelievable right now. And we have 2 solid corners. And I know you like Hamilton as well. So they're there. But while we're on the defensive end, we might as well. Let's talk about the safety position. Oh, we lost Pletz. But at the safety position, we lose Evan Williams. But where are we looking? What are we looking like at the safety position right now?
Yeah, they lose Evan Williams, but Dean Clark sure came in and looked like he filled the void pretty quickly in the spring. Wearing number 32, looks in the realm of what Evan Williams looks like. I mean, a lot of people said they didn't notice the difference because there was a number 32 killing it at safety all spring long. Pretty similar dimensions and measurables and everything. So, fingers crossed that it looks like that on Saturdays. And then Stephen Comstock really seemed to pull away in the spring. We only saw him took a couple of snaps in that spring preview, one of them being a one-handed interception. So it looks like he's got a hold on it. There's plenty of other safeties back there to work with some depth. Krishan Gordon, I know, has been competing for that spot. Kosi Aguina has been back there. He might be playing somewhere else. I mean, there's a handful of different guys that could be the next ones up. But I think Clark and Comstock are going to be the starters, and that's a pretty good 1-2 punch. Both older guys. Again, you're not having to go through much growing pains with the 2 seniors as your starters to replace the guys you lose.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this is number 1 defense in the Mountain West this year?
I think so. I mean, if the only question I have right now is if they can replace David Perales.
Right.
I really like the starting four that the D-line that the Bulldogs have, but do they have that one guy that can make a difference the way Perales did? And Bridges might be that guy at end now. I know Isaiah Johnson has been solid throughout his whole Bulldog career, but maybe not quite in the backfield as much as Perales. So if they get that one edge rusher situated, which maybe they already have it with Bridges, there's no reason why they shouldn't be as good as they were last year personnel-wise. And then you look at this time last year, they're starting the defense from scratch. This year, they all had a whole year under the defense. They're going into new layers, adding more to the playbook. I just don't see any way this defense can falter as long as they have pressure up front, which I think they should.
Yeah. And so on the defensive side of the ball last season, Carlton Johnson was kind of one of the big names that kind of came out of nowhere. Most fans probably had never heard of him. And he ended up being really strong contributor towards the end of the season. Now, worked his way into the starting lineup. So, is there anyone that on the team that you've kind of picked up on? It's like, okay, this could be a newcomer or someone who was buried in the depth chart last year that could be ready to make that jump into being a big time contributor.
It could come at that same cornerback position, just because you don't have Cale Sanders anymore, you don't have Braylon Lux anymore. William Hamilton really separated himself in the spring as the mid-season, like Carlton Johnson did, that Hamilton could step in and really surprise people. I know they were trying to work him in last year. He got some reps at nickel, but he's not as far of a number 3 cornerback as I think many people would expect.
Good. Yeah, that's good to hear. Especially it seems like, depth is got to be a concern for this team because, we know the names of all the starters, but, behind them, if someone, God forbid goes down, I mean, someone's got to step up. And I mean, also with a name like Alzillian, I feel like you need to like back that up and be a solid player just because that's such a cool name.
Bob's a big Comstock fan. He's rooting for him. Me too. Especially after watching the spring game or preview. I'm sorry. It was a lot of fun watching him out there, and he's had to work his way in. Quick thing, since we're on defense and we've been here for a while, are we going to be playing 4-2-5 with a nickel still? Are we going to be running a 4-3, 3-4? What are we going to run it all? What is it looking like right now?
Yeah, the 4-2-5 should continue to be the base. Probably the one area that leaves some intrigue is in the linebacker unit. They've got more guys. They could play some 4-3 if they wanted to. They've got a guy like Tuasivi Nomura coming from USC, who is basically an outside linebacker, a position that is not really in this 4-2-5 scheme. He played some linebacker. He played some defensive end in the spring. So, and then even a guy like Raymond Scott, who got injured last year, he was being pushed by some of the young guys, Phoenix Jackson and Tim Thomas. So I could see them maybe looking to get 3 linebackers on the field, especially with the nickelback being a little bit thin. If something were to happen to Maurice Norris or he's tired, they could maybe go with some different looks there since there's not a lot at that position right now.
Could you see any of those guys playing nickel if they want to stay in the base? Any of those linebacker guys that you mentioned?
Nomura can cover some ground, but I think they like him more in the box. I think you probably look at the defensive backs. Coach Coyle put a couple of his safeties at nickelback over the course of last season, which was a more traditional extra defensive back than what that position really is. We saw LJ Early there at times, and Hamilton, as mentioned, got some reps there, and maybe a guy like Kosi Aguina, who might be odd man out right now at safety, could fill in that gap too at nickel.
Okay. All right, let's move to the offensive side of the ball, shall we?
Oh, yeah.
All right. And then I guess we'll get to commits. Since we're just going through everything, let's just keep going. Let's talk about the quarterback position. We see posters everywhere with Mikey Keene on it. He's signing autographs at the bars. What I'm thinking he's the starter, but give me a percentage here when it comes to Fife getting the starting job. What's your prediction there? We're playing profit. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm assuming that Mikey Keene is going to be the starter. I think the odds are very high for him. I can say that even with media coverage, we're not allowed to see a lot that goes on in spring when it comes to like the actual 11 on 11, where you find out who's really winning that stuff. And in the one day we got to see the scrimmage in the spring preview, Logan Fife sure looked pretty decent. He had a good day, and Keene wasn't necessarily over the top impressive. I mean, it looked fairly competitive between the two, I thought, on that day. But my still assumption is that by the time the Bulldogs get to Purdue, they'll have known Keene's been the starter for a week or two and have everything ready to go for that first team. The posters, at least, I know one's regarding NIL, and he's probably the biggest NIL player on campus. So even if he's the backup, he should be on that poster. Yeah, I think all signs point to him being the guy.
He's not going to care. He's making money. No.
So we just got a comment on Twitter asking if there's any likelihood of any of the non-starters transferring maybe mid-season. So any insights there? If maybe Joshua Wood is third or maybe even fourth on the depth chart behind Mandel. Like, is there any worry there that he might hit the portal?
I think Tedford's played it out pretty well. He's got the 4 guys he was invested in long term, and it's tough because all the eligibility is so close. Fife and Keene are both 3, Woods 4, Mandel's 5. It's hard to see it working out long term, but it seems like he does have everyone bought in. I know Wood has pushed to the point to where it's tough to put him in as a starter right now, but he could be the better quarterback in 2 or 3 years, perhaps, given his ceiling. So I think unless someone just totally falls out of the pecking order, that they'll probably stick through at least through this season. What we've seen lately is that players, unless something really bad happens in fall camp and they get out, you're only going to see a mid-season deal as if they're being asked to burn a red shirt and they don't want to fill in a game or whatever here or there. So we'll see what happens after this season, but I think it'll stay intact through the end of the 2023 season.
Now, the biggest question mark outside of the offensive line, because there will always be questions, it seems like. All throughout the season, there will be questions. Unfortunately, I don't want it to be that way, but it just happens past 3 years. Wide receiver position. What does that group look like right now? I know we have some JC studs that have come in. We have some young guys that are very fast. What are your expectations from the wide receiver group after seeing them?
Yeah, I think it's a fairly deep group as far as the talent that they've got. I mean, there's not a big gap, I don't think, from probably number 3 or 4 to 8 with all the players that they have added. But you really want those really, really good 1, 2, and 3 guys on the field. And do they have that? We've seen Eric Brooks do a lot. Is he going to be able to carry to an extent on the offense? He's heading to Vegas as the offense's vocal representation at media days. So there's a lot on his shoulders right now in that scheme. Josiah Freeman is a guy who hasn't played any D1 football. He might be a starter, perhaps, as a guy that redshirted last year as a junior college transfer. Magdalena, is he going to be ready to make a big step and be that one of the guys on the outside as kind of a smaller outside wide receiver? I think Jalen Moss, freshman last year, had a really good spring. Probably those 4 guys, I think, are in the lead as far as who was here in the spring. But now you add in a couple more transfers. You've got Jalen Gill and Michael Barkley, 2 really dynamic athletes, probably slot receivers. And so it's really up for grabs. There's about 3 or 4 other guys that didn't even come out of my discussion just now that are as well in the competition. And so it's going to be heated this fall, I would say, for sure. And hopefully they have enough top-end talent to replicate something like we've seen the last couple of years from that group.
Wide receiver that's us. And Bulldogs Bob is not worried. He says we're going to be fine long-term at wide receiver. Moss is our next star, in my opinion. So I guess it sounds like from you, Jackson, and Bob, and I'm also not too worried. I think we're going to be fine. It's just getting them the ball. And to get them the ball, they have to be protected. So we talked about Mose. We've talked about Spomer. What else is going on the own line? Because to be honest, Jackson, I don't know what to think yet.
Yeah, it's the position where you've got the most carryover from the year before, and it's also a position that might make you more uneasy than some of the other ones with the way that particular group has gone over the past couple of years. We did see Jacob Spomer at the very end of spring take some reps at center, so I mean that's something that can pick things up. They brought in Kingsley Ugwu from Kansas State. Didn't play a whole lot there, but is still a Big 12 transfer and should compete for tackle. Hayden Poulos from Fresno City was on his way to being a big-time recruit before he tore his ACL over there with the Rams. And as long as he's healthy, he could end up being a big steal. And then you've just got a whole bunch of familiar faces on the interior, and you hope that someone kind of emerges, or that Coach Brian Armstrong coming in maybe tweaks some things, gets the best out of some of those guys that have played a lot, but all have been competing with one another, even rotating last year. I don't think that we're going to see much of that this season.
Oh, thank goodness. I don't like change, so I like seeing the same guys, playing. Mendoza D85, he asks, who is RB2? Is that going to be Gilliam, or are we looking at Moore here?
On paper, it should be Damian Moore, transfer from Cal. Had a really good freshman year during the pandemic and kind of fell off a little bit. It got a fresh start at Fresno State, but spent a lot of the spring hurt, so don't really know quite exactly how he fits in yet. Elijah Gilliam filled that gap and was number 3 last year, essentially. So even though I don't believe he's on scholarship yet, still a pretty promising player at the position. You can even look at potentially the freshmen coming in. I know Brandon Ramirez was pinned in at safety all through the recruiting class, and now they're thinking they're going to bring him in as a running back. So I don't know if that's more telling about how great he was at running back at Memorial, or how concerned they are about the talent or depth at running back for the current team. So, and don't count out Devin Rivers or Charles Greer either. I mean, they've got a whole group of talented freshmen that could contend. So I think right now for me, it's Sherrod 1, everyone else. I mean, the open battle for whoever else wants it after that.
We even saw some walk-ons, and they got reps in the spring preview. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. Okay, you brought up some young guys. Can we talk about recruiting, or do they need to go to BarkBoard?
I can discuss some recruiting.
Okay. Art, I see you on YouTube. We will get to that in a second. Okay, so we had a couple local commits over the past couple weeks. Can you touch on that? A couple Clovis West, Visalia kids. What's going on? What are we looking at, and who was it?
Yeah, so 3 commits in 3 days, all local kids, all involved in Fresno State's camp they had last weekend, the weekend before this past weekend. They had like 500 plus kids, a lot of locals, and Marcel Akins from El Diamante High School ended up being the first to commit, a guy that we've got rated on 24/7 Sports with an 85 rating in the 3-star tier. So goes from 81 to 89. If you get a 85 up for Fresno State or any Mountain West school, that's a pretty good get. So for him to be in your own backyard, he had an offer to Washington State. That's one, you hope you get for Fresno State, and that you'd hope Coach Tedford at this point would be able to bring in consistently. And I think they did that already this last week with the 2024 class. Titus Kajavi came in the next day, linebacker from Clovis West, a guy that had no other offers before and was not rated, and now he's been evaluated as an 85 also. They really like him. I mean, really good get for Fresno State as far as what he's being projected. Didn't have to battle with any other offers, but they got on him first. And then Jordan Piero, also at Clovis West, a 3-star with an 83 rating, defensive back. He plays both ways at wide receiver too. The guy that had a pretty good showing at the Sacramento State camp. I was over there earlier in the month, and there were a lot of coaches looking at him. I mean, they got 3 in, and you look around the valley, and there's still a lot of other targets. There's probably about 6 other Valley recruits that Fresno State's after in this class. A couple they offered out of Bakersfield last week. 2 more at Clovis West in this class. Logan Stute at Bakersfield. I mean, it could be a Valley heavy class, and it's not guys that they're just trying to keep from going to San Jose State or Nevada. It's guys that they're trying to steal from the Oregon States and the Washington States out there.
Yeah, I saw a couple of them release their top 5s, top 4s, and they had Washington in there. Like, stay away. We sent you away from here. What do you guys do? But yeah, a lot of local kids, and I'm excited about it. Caleb, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the linebacker from Buchanan, Logan Stute, is that how you say the last name? I don't know how to say it, but it seems like he is like really highly regarded, and it seems like that would be a huge pickup for Fresno State. And yeah, just so many targets out of Clovis West. It's kind of like the old days when Clovis West was like kind of the pipeline to Fresno State back in the day. So yeah, just really exciting to see the local guys coming in the program, and local players want to be involved with this. So I think that's kind of something that we've been curious lately, Jackson, and asking people, I mean, what's the perception of local athletes? Because I know that, after the DeRuyter era, I feel like a lot of people were kind of had an unsavory taste in their mouth a little bit about Fresno State football, and kind of being overlooked. And so, I mean, what's just the general perception of most local recruits? I mean, are they like eager to get to Fresno State? I mean, obviously, if they're higher profile, I'm sure they have higher aspirations. But just kind of what's the general perception of most recruits that you're interacting with?
Yeah, I think Tedford was the perfect recipe to fix all the DeRuyter stuff back in 2017. Before he ever coached a game for Fresno State as the head coach, he sent the whole staff out to every crevice in the valley, and it was big school, small school. They tried to repair all those relationships right away, and we saw that kind of carry over in that DeBoer gap. I mean, they got Jordan Hornbeek and a couple of other pretty talented Valley players during that stretch that you would think during 2014 to 16 or whatever wouldn't have stayed around or thought about it. So I think for the most part, unless you're getting those major offers or maybe some crazy NIL money for whatever reason, as long as you don't have to compete with USC or Texas or Oklahoma or whatever for a recruit in your backyard, I think Fresno State has got a shot. And that's pretty much where most of these recruits in the Valley the last couple of years, the top end guys have been in that range, maybe except for Xavier Worthy. They've all been guys that have a few Pac-12 offers and Fresno State. And Fresno State right now has got the recipe to be attractive enough to keep those players home. And I think we'll see if that's the case here this year with Logan Stute and Marshall Sanders at Clovis West. Those are the two highest priority recruits in the Valley. But again, kind of in between there with about 4 or 5 Pac-12 offers in Fresno State. We'll see if the Bulldogs can pull that off. I think they've done about all they can to put themselves in that spot right now.
Well, and we have a really good argument against USC and UCLA now. You don't have to sit on a flight to Rutgers. So any other news that you think the Red Wave should know, Jackson, for football before we move to my one basketball question?
It's still busy recruiting time. That's going to slow down a little bit in July for the quiet period, and we'll have about 4 weeks to, I guess, for preseason stories and stuff. Fall camp will be here. But yeah, they've just been really busy recruiting. One of the more interesting offers I saw was to Connor Workington recently, whose older brother Colby Workington was a Bulldog for a couple of years. So that would be a pretty cool story if he ends up at Fresno State. And we're not too far away from fall camp. So hopefully this offseason goes by quick.
Caleb, anything on Twitter that you need to get to?
We have one question from SSN Fresno State. He's asking, is Fresno State pitching a possible move to the Big 12 as part of their recruiting pitch to any players? I don't know if you've heard anything about that, but that's the question we got.
Yeah, I've not heard any recruits mention that. It's not to say that it hasn't happened. I've heard some recruits from other schools talking about those schools going here or there, and none of that's happened yet. I think just in general, though, the excitement that all this has brought to the Red Wave and has increased the attendance numbers the last couple of years, recruits are going to the games and they're seeing that, and it's a different atmosphere than even Tedford's first time around here. So it's playing into it indirectly, I guess.
All right. So I know I don't know, actually. I shouldn't say that. I think we have one scholarship available for the basketball team due to the incident with JoJo Hunter. Is that correct, Jackson?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
They did recently have to add a commit, but that still leaves open one spot. And
Are we
you know,
hearing anything about that or no?
haven't heard a whole lot. The last few names that have popped up have been high schoolers, which, at least for me, hoping to see maybe a late junior college edition or a transfer, someone that maybe is a little more encouraging to be an immediate impact player, considering what Coach Hudson has on his contract and how important this 1 year is going to be. But you're also in an area right now where a lot of high schoolers are getting overlooked. You only have a few scholarships, and a lot of schools are using them on junior college and transfers. So there could be some hidden gems out there. Seems to be what they're doing right now, unless they've got something up their sleeve I haven't caught wind of yet.
We hear about the JC and high school stuff a lot, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. I was just wondering if you heard anything. Okay. Are you ready for the big one, Jackson? I know you talked to Tony a lot about this and everything, but we're going to talk expansion. And Art Velasco wants to know, what are the odds we see an expansion move in the next 12 months? But then Robert said, I'm thinking, he said, forget the next 12 months. How about the next 12 days? What, where in this realm is the expansion looking, if any?
I think you should probably be on your toes through July. That's my timeline right now. That's been basically what I've gathered through all this. But you look at the San Diego State letter to the Mountain West, and they basically asked for 30 extra days on their July 30th buyout. So I think that tells you all you need to know. I think by the end of July, the Pac-12 should have their TV deal done or not done, and teams are going to – one or two might go somewhere else. So that's my guess right now. They could sign that TV deal, keep everyone together. I haven't heard any numbers that would suggest that they're going to have a great outcome with all that, but they've pretty much, between that TV deal and for teams potentially notifying other conferences, it can't go much farther beyond July unless everything just stays where it is. So that's what I'm looking for, and we'll see how the dominoes affect Fresno State from there.
Okay, let's play some hypotheticals here. If the Pac-12 stays together, what happens in Fresno?
Yeah, that one, it's tough. That's one part I haven't quite cracked, just because you could see them adding Colorado and Arizona and going to 14, let's say, and they could stop, or they could not add anyone and not, or the Pac-12 could stay together and the Big 12 could not add anyone. They could still have a interest in adding teams and bring in Fresno State and someone else. That's kind of the question mark for me, is I haven't quite figured out who that other team would be. That makes sense. It's hard for me to imagine the Big 12 adding Fresno State and becoming the Big 13 and not doing anything else as nice as it would be. So we'll see if Memphis or UConn or someone else might be strong enough to bring the Bulldogs in. But you also, if the Pac-12 doesn't lose anyone, then you would imagine Fresno State's at the top of their list for expansion. It's just a matter of if they do it or not. And you're not worried about being left out, but you might be left out by nothing happening, essentially. So still a lot of ways it can go. It's tough to say. And then, if they add 2 and they go to 14, it could make sense for them to add 2 more and go to 16 pretty easily. So it's tough to say. I think Fresno State's in a good spot. It's just tough to tell which scenario works best outside of one Pac-12 school leaving. I think that's really the magic recipe for Fresno State, not to have to sweat it out. I think they'd be the other school that goes with either Colorado or Arizona.
Mm-hmm. 2 more things for you when it comes to expansion that I hear a little bit of, but not a lot. Any grumblings in the Mountain West Conference about them grabbing a team to show up San Diego State?
I haven't heard much on that. There hasn't been much discussion. I know some of the most attractive FCS schools in the mountain region aren't necessarily all that interested in going to FBS and giving up their national championships and all that. The teams in Texas that are attractive have basically all been scooped up by the American Athletic Conference now. The only thing I've seen throw out there, which I wouldn't mind seeing, is if the Mountain West brought Hawaii in for all the other sports to backfill San Diego State, at least. So on that side of things, you would fill in a gap, but you'd still be kind of one team short on football.
And the last thing that I want to ask you is, what happens with this rivalry between Fresno State and San Diego State?
It's a good question. Yeah. You could theoretically have a situation here where Fresno State, San Jose State, and San Diego State are in 3 different conferences in a year or two. And
wow.
I know Fresno State. Well, I know San Jose State would love to keep the Fresno State series going. And if you're Fresno State, that's a pretty easy game to schedule. And if you've got 4 Power 5 teams automatically coming to Valley Children's Stadium every year, you can go a little easier on non-conference, I guess, compared to your past. But I mean, I would love to see Fresno State play those 2 schools, even if they're not in the conference. I mean, I'm seeing a similar thing right now with Stanford and Cal, where reality is setting in like, hey, these guys, USC and UCLA, aren't on the non-conference schedule anytime soon. Is this over? And it might be because
that's sad.
Yeah. I mean, those 2 conferences, they only have 3 non-conference games. And if you want to play an FCS school or whatever, you got 2. So, it gets pretty slim, and then it kind of gets boring if you play the same teams every year in non-conference and don't mix it up. So,
and the small schools quit making money.
Yeah. I would be surprised if at least one Cal State rivalry did not continue in that scenario, most likely with the Spartans, I would think.
So, Jackson, we asked this question a couple episodes back, and it was, if Fresno State does get invited to either Pac-12 or Big 12, and now all of a sudden we have, I guess higher profile, teams coming into Bulldog Stadium or former Bulldog Stadium, 3-4 times a year. Do you think that actually makes an immediate impact in terms of actual butts and seats in the stadium, or is the team still going to need to be pretty close to undefeated to get close to a sellout?
I think it would make a percentage of a difference. If Fresno State is maybe, I don't know, 5-4 and TCU's coming to town or something, I think that would grab a lot of attention. But if Fresno State's doing good anyway, they might just make up the difference of the 1,000 or 2,000 seats that weren't sold per game last year. So, but if the team's just doing real bad, I can see Oklahoma State or whatever coming to town and a lot of empty seats. But
exactly,
and that's a tough one too, because if you get in the Big 12, I mean, you would be a part of about 14 to 16 teams that are all really good. You're not going to have 3 or 4 bottom feeders in your conference that you get those wins off of every year and at least stay afloat in an average season. So, I mean, there were some really good teams in the Big 12 this year that didn't go bowling, and you've got to sustain the excitement. I think where it would make a difference is basketball, though. I mean, they've got a lot of great basketball teams, and people that aren't coming to basketball games right now might show up if Kansas or Texas Tech or Baylor's in town. I think that would probably be even at a percentage rate bigger than football right now.
That scares me. About basketball. Bobby Hernandez says, yeah, butts and seats. There'll be butts and seats. I had do you think, and I heard this somewhere and I forget, and I actually agree with this, that conferences would be looking for basketball teams possibly to add, and then their football programs would follow, because there's a larger opportunity for you to get multiple teams into the tournament. So now the whole conference is making more money than they would if they bring in a solid football team with a really bad basketball program. So that's why people are throwing around Gonzaga and a San Diego State and things like that. Is that at all true, or is it all about football?
I think the Big 12 has tried to push that a little bit, at least in the commissioner's office. And They haven't gotten over the hump to do that. They brought up Gonzaga and UConn as basketball additions potentially, and that didn't seem to pass or gain much traction from that proposal. So maybe that's something that could come after football. I mean, as good as the Big 12 has been already in basketball, imagine Gonzaga and UConn in that conference. I mean, that's pretty scary. But even all that considered, it doesn't really do much for the TV numbers. That's all going to come from football and Fresno State and Central California with the big fan base and a lot of TVs to draw from in the Valley. I mean, that's something that they're interested in.
Yeah, I think everyone that says the Save Mart Center is very uncomfortable, and I'm one of them, I would show up very quickly if we had a 3-game homestand with UConn, Baylor, and Gonzaga. Yeah. Anything on your end, Caleb, on Twitter? Any questions?
The only other question we got was if the invite to the Big 12 comes, could the Bulldogs bring wrestling back?
You would think theoretically that could be in play. I haven't heard anything specifically on the topic or anything tentative or anything like that. I think the room that the wrestling team was in is still kind of just sitting there empty, so they haven't replaced it with anything, I don't think. So I don't know. Maybe there's something potentially there in the back of their minds, but I don't have anything solid to report on that front.
All right. Well, I got nothing. If you guys have any more questions, throw it in the chat. I got to tell Jackson here, I love the Tarkanian deal in the back. I don't know what's next to it, though, but I'd be careful if I think that's what it is. But okay, you're on BarkBoard. Oh, I got a question in from Mendoza D85. Where is Boise in all of this? In this expansion equation?
Yeah, I haven't heard much of anything for Boise, which
good
surprises me a little bit, just because being there in person, not necessarily a championship game, but the regular season game. I mean, that atmosphere was crazy, and it was like this kind of feels like some sort of Power 5 football, just like when Valley Children's Stadium is rocking. It's like this belongs in the Power 5, this atmosphere and this fan base. But and TV numbers, they typically draw the best in the conference. They get the most favorable network TV games to draw those types of numbers, but they do have some national pull from that blue turf. But I think there's just that, what happens if they're no good at football and people aren't watching, and now you're stuck with Boise, Idaho in your conference? It just seems to be the red stop sign for a Big 12 right now.
Yeah. We got everybody roasting. Truck driver school. They're in the welfare line. Yeah. Okay. BarkBoard. What's going on at BarkBoard? If people don't know, Jackson runs BarkBoard.com, and you get to know everything about Fresno State and the ins and outs. Like, when do guys start sweating on the field? It's ridiculous. Tell us about BarkBoard and what's going on, and if there's anything. Are you doing a deal right now? You let us know.
Yeah, we got a deal going on for our VIP side right now. It's 50% off for a year. It's like $4.48 a month that way. So that's running through Thursday the 29th. And with VIP, we cover all the inside stuff. We've got our, the stories behind the paywall is all there, and the message board is also a big deal. We some things that don't turn into stories or some scoops, we just throw them on the message board, and only the VIP see them, and that's the end of that. But we cover everything: football, basketball, recruiting. This past month of June has been a big recruiting month. July will be big on preseason coverage and getting into some interviews we've done over the off season and previewing what's to come. And then when fall camp gets around, we'll be there every day with the media access, covering the team and giving daily reports, analysis on the newcomers and all that good stuff. So, and we try to do as much free stories as we can to cover what's going on as well, and the basic coverage. And we've got a story about all the local recruiting on the homepage right now. So, we just try to get it all there.
Don't give them the free stuff, Jackson. Make them pay. No, honestly, Jackson, you do great work. Pletz and I both our VIP members, and it's unbelievable, guys, what Jackson does. I encourage you, if you are not a VIP member, try it out this year. Just test it. It's $4. Test it out. It's awesome. It changed our lives. We realized no wonder no one listens to us. So we got to check out. You got to check out what Jackson's doing. So BarkBoard.com. Sign up to be a VIP. Caleb, anything else that we want to end with here?
I don't think so. I think we pretty much covered it. I mean, Jackson, we appreciate your time. And I did want to ask one question, because I know you had a Wednesday special a couple months back that I really liked. You're kind of going over through like your whole history of being a Bulldog fan, which I really apprecited listening or like while reading, because like, yeah, we're in similar age. So like we pretty much lived the same thing and like, going to games at a former Bulldog stadium. So, but I did want to ask, like, was there any like player or a couple players football wise that you feel like are totally underappreciated that, Bulldog fans just didn't know what they had, and then either they graduated or went pro or something that so any names there that stick out that like, we had something really good and we didn't appreciate them?
That is a good question.
Yeah,
man. I'm trying to think.
So like for me, I feel like Ben Jacobs was just like the stud middle linebacker, and 4 years, I mean, I don't think he ever missed a game. I mean, and he was just in the middle of the field making so many tackles. And now like kind of going through coaching changes and like being really thin at linebacker, it's like, wow, like we just had a Ben Jacobs. That would be really nice right now.
Very true. I guess a lot of them for me are just covering the recruiting side. A lot of the guys that, for a lack of a word, bust. They just don't turn out, or they don't show up at all. I know for our basketball, like the top 10 commits, there's like 6 or 7 that never played for Fresno State or didn't last very long. So you could have an all Bulldog bust basketball team. That would be a heck of a team on paper. But I'd like to think the football players have gotten their flowers. So a lot of them. I mean, there's just so many that have come through, especially the Pat Hill years. There's a lot of NFL players that played for Pat that probably don't get mentioned around here very much these days. But there's about 10, 15 NFL guys now. The numbers dwindled a little bit. So yeah, I see Ryan Matthews. I mean,
yep.
So he was very exciting. It makes you just think about all the players, maybe who should be up there on that wall or on the press box that's not up there yet.
Mm-hmm.
How about, hear me out, a Philip Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, that season he had was spectacular. And I'll say it's probably the most fun I've had covering the team was watching before the 2011 season, which we won't get into. Derek and Philip Thomas just go. I mean, those two guys, it was like watching NFL players leading a bunch of college guys in practice every day, and they were battling so hard. And I mean, when Philip got hurt before that 2011 season, it makes a lot of sense why it went the way it did. And I'm just glad that his leg repaired enough to do what he did in 2012. But yeah, consensus All-American. I mean, not too many other Bulldogs. Maybe no other Bulldogs can say that.
Oh man. Bobby's Hernandez. By the way, there's a lot of you Bobs out there, I'm finding. Bobby Hernandez says that we need a studio set with TV backgrounds, chowing on Bulldog food and beers. I couldn't agree more. I'm ready. Jackson, you make more money than Pletz and I combined, so you're gonna have to, it's on you. Buy the VIP, and then Jackson can pay for it. So Jackson, we really appreciate it, man. It's always a good time, and we run into you a lot, so and feel free to say hi or come by the winery sometime. We'll happy to hang out. So thanks, man. Appreciate it. Any last words for the Red Wave?
Yeah, I just really appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you very much. And getting excited for August and September. It's time.
Yep, same here.
All right, go Dogs.